I'm Stephen Bailey, the host of In Defense of Freedom, a production of the California Constitutional Rights Foundation. Today we have as our guest Senator Mike Morrell, who's a candidate for chairman of the California Republican Party. We're going to take a few minutes and ask Mike his vision of where the Republican Party will be in the future, where it is today, and how he intends to provide the leadership for the party that is so desperately needed. Mike?
Well, thank you, Mr. Stephen Bailey, for having me on today. It's an honor to be on your show. Good program you have, by the way.
Thank you. Give us a little bit about your background. I know you were a state senator, but I don't really know very much about how you came up. And tell us about your family and, why you would want to be state party chairman.
Well, those are good questions. Thank you. And the reason why it's a good question is some people ask me, what am I going to do if I'm chair? Well, you can kind of promise, right? Anything. But I think it's more important to look at a person's track record. What have I done? Have I accomplished anything? So I've been fortunate. I think the Almighty has been kind to me and sometimes has placed me in places that perhaps I'm not talented, but for some reason I end up through hard work and that sort of thing doing okay. So I got into sales because I'm not good mechanically. Not a scientist when it comes to, whatever. So what could I do? Well, commission sales. So I got in to the title business years ago when I first got married at 24. And then I opened my own real estate business. In 89, I incorporated, and then I opened a lending company, also incorporated in 1989. So I had two California corporations. Then we opened an LLC for property management outside of California. And so I was fortunate to have these businesses. And matter of fact, let me go back even a little bit. When I was 28 years old, 27, 28, we had our first child, Kristen. And so, trying to figure out why am I here on this earth? For what purpose am I here? And so I really searched that through, for months. And so the message I got was the duty of a father is to leave an inheritance to their children's children. And I thought, well, that's not a very, leave them each $5, right? That's not a very high calling. Right. But that kind of morphed into something more important about God, country, and family, and leaving them not just a financial inheritance, but one freedom of religion, property rights, to be governed by consent, just like our Constitution Declaration tells us, right? And so that kind of took on a bigger meaning. And so anyway, the reason I stepped into being self-employed is I thought that would be a good position for me to be because I didn't like people over me, And so
I understand that completely.
Yeah, I remember one time I broke a company sales record, and it got back to me. The management came to me and said, we're going to change your commission to make it more fair and equitable to you and the company after I set a company record. Well, it wasn't fair or equitable to me, right? And so that really propelled me to open my own business, right? And so I did that. It was good. And then trying to be a person that does have a belief in God, I wanted to do other things. So being self-employed provided me opportunity to I got 6 of my friends. So there were 7 of us. We got together. We all owned different businesses. And we hired a guy who had been a pastor in the mission field to do work for us within the community. We started a prayer breakfast that's been going on for 31 years now. 500-600 people show up every year. We started a food bank. A church took it over, and I understand they feed about 40,000 meals a year now. So I got to do a lot of things in the community, which I really like doing. And I got involved with politics because politics is, other people telling you how to live. And so I wanted to have my hand in that. I want to be a good example to my kids to show them that their dad's just not trying to make a living, but he's trying to get involved with the community. And then that morphed into running for state assembly. And so in 2010, I won a seat in the state assembly, and I was there 3.5 years. A special election came up for Senate, and then I won that Senate seat, and I was there for 6.5 years for a total of 10 in Sacramento. So it's great to be out of Sacramento and back in my neighborhood where people are normal, right? So it was a good experience for those 10 years. But But boy, you saw the dark side of life. How people can believe in some of the things they believe is beyond me. Especially today when you talk about drag queen hours and you actually have that. You've got our governor that wants to make this a state, a sanctuary state, so kids they can transition. And when kids are in the third and fifth grade, they don't know what they want to be. My goodness gracious, I changed my mind from the time I was, in elementary school through high school and college, probably 20 times what I wanted to do. And so I just think things have gotten crazy here. And that's why I want to be involved in politics. Then I turned out and I took a consulting job for a title company for sales and marketing. And I was there for about a year and I just missed politics. So I wrote a book to help our country. And the title of it is The Road to Restoring the Family. And so then I've maybe done 100 speeches in churches and political clubs, Republican clubs. And I think that more if people saw that, that's sort of a resume on what Mike Morrell believes. And so I think people like that book. And then I got drafted to run for the chair of the California GOP. But let me go back. I kind of missed a few things too. I've had some experience. Hillsdale College, our two boys went there. We loved that school. And so I was president of the parents board and got to implement some strategies to get the retention rate up from 73 to 93%, which took about 5 years. And so that was a great experience. I was on the board up until recently, and then I dropped off to run for Arizona Christian University. And I got to try to help them with implementing some fundraising strategies and that kind of thing. Been on the board of the Building Industry Association, so I understand why homes are so expensive, and it all has to do with a expanding government who wants more money for the permits, and then they take 2.5 to 3 years to build a home with everything you have to go through with the regulations, which increases the price, and it prohibits people from buying homes. I did some research. In 1981, the average age for a newly married couple buying a home in California was 31 years old. Today it's 45. And so, again, it has to do with government interference. And so there's just a lot of things that we can change through getting back to our Constitution on limiting government's power and giving it back to we the people. And so I'm excited about running for this chair. So those are a few of the things that I've done, and I hope I didn't talk too much. You know my whole life story now, so.
I've learned so much about your background. I've heard you speak before about Hillsdale, and it was so impressive that, that is one college that is unique maybe in all the country where it doesn't take any government money. So to hear your perspective on Hillsdale gives us a perspective, probably tells us what your real background is, that you're not anti-business or government, but you have a healthy respect for what government can do from a power standpoint. So that's something I'm impressed with.
Yeah, Dr. Larry Arnn started in California at the Claremont Institute, which was a conservative think tank. So I actually met him almost 40 years ago. And so then our two boys, they thrived at Hillsdale. And our daughter, it was kind of funny. She didn't want to go to Hillsdale because she had been in Christian school pretty much all her life, but she went to visit her brother, and she said, "Oh man, did I blow it, man?" She goes, "This school." But anyway, she ended up going to grad school and getting her master's in political philosophy, and ended up teaching political science class at a Christian university. So Hillsdale really impacted her too.
I got a couple questions, Mike, about, you spent 10 years, you said, in the California legislature, both in the Assembly and the state Senate. But you mentioned that before you went to Sacramento that you'd been involved in local politics. What are the types of things that you did when you were in the local politics? I guess what I'm really looking at, so many party chairmen or so many people in the party become so important that they can't go out and do the grassroots stuff. Tell me about what kind of grassroots work you did in coming up and developing yourself to get ready to run for public office.
Yeah, no, I was not an elected official. Assembly was my first public office, but Alexis de Tocqueville, in his book, Democracy in America, he's sent by the country of France to discover the greatness and genius of America. And so he writes that 700 plus page classic called Democracy in America. And he points out 100 things. He says, I did not see their success in their vast world commerce or their agriculture or their deep water seaways or their waterways or this or that. He just goes on and he says, that's not where I found the genius and success. He said, I found it when I entered the churches and saw that the pulpits were aflame with righteousness. And then another comment attributed to him says, but if the pulpit is no longer aflame with righteousness, could it be that people will no longer know the truth? And so his idea that what made America such a success was the pulpit. In other words, and it is theology applied. In other words, things start in the pulpit. It goes to the people in the pews. The people in the pews have different jobs in different categories, right? And they take that out into the public as they're supposed to. They get involved with education. They get involved with school board meetings, with their local city councils, and they exercise their civic responsibility. And then what happens, the end result manifests itself in politics. And so politics is theology applied. In other words, if you want to see how strong the pulpit is in America, you look at the end result, which is politics. And so our pulpit has gotten, I think, a little bit weak throughout America. So realizing this, I got involved and I got Dr. Arn, who was president of Hillsdale College. Would do some seminars for pastors in our area to get them involved. And then I started a group, like I say, with 7 of us who own different businesses. And we got together and we had 5 categories we want to go after. And one of them was civic responsibility. How do we teach that? How do we get that involved? And then the other thing that I did, I was fortunate. I had a number of churches ask me to speak about civic responsibility and what's a citizen's duty and responsibility to our community, our local community, our state, as well as that. And then I ended up being asked to be on a senator's business advisory board back then, and hopefully I contributed something there. So yeah, I've done that. I was involved, as I mentioned, with the Claremont Institute, which is a conservative-based constitutional think tank here in California. And so I was involved with that for years and put on some programs with the former president, Dr. Larry Arn, in the local community. So I was pretty involved doing things, and it was all with trying to reach the people and the pulpit and business owners.
So you really have a grassroots background then in working in the community and working on civic responsibility throughout your community.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when I ran, my consultant said, go ask for endorsements from, other senators and the assembly people and city council. And nobody really wanted to endorse me. And so what I did is I just said, I'm going to go to the people, And so I would go to business owners, because maybe they have 5 employees, maybe they had 50, but they have an outreach within the community. And so I would line up business owners, I would line up people, just friends, and I started building this list of people who were going to support me. And it grew into the hundreds, right? Just local people. And so I think what happens then is some of the elected started seeing that. So then some of your city council people jumped on with me. Some of the people from water districts jumped on. And then that list grew bigger and bigger. And then finally some electeds, they thought that I was going to win, so they jumped on. And so,
right.
Yeah. And so anyway, on this election, the same thing's sort of happening. I don't have the beautiful people endorse me right now. But what's happened is my wife reminded me, go to the grassroots, right? We the people. That's where you've been successful before. Do it again. So I've been doing that. And it's like a pyramid, right? My base is getting real strong and wide and deep. And then, I'm going up, the food chain, if you will. And I'm starting to have electeds jump on there. I even had kind of a powerful guy, you'd say, in the temporal sense, calling me and asking me questions and seeing if there's a partnership we can get going. So anyway, yeah, I if I win, it'll be in kind of the grassroots, and that's I'd rather be behold. That's going back to when I ran my first assembly race. That was another thing I thought is I'd rather be beholding to the grassroots than the electeds, and I feel the same way today.
Bottom up.
Bottom up, man. Amen.
Yep. So let's talk talk a little bit about your race for party chairman. Tell me why, I mean, you've done so many things and contributed so much to the community. And why would you want to be Republican Party chairman in California?
Well, okay, so it was not on my radar. Okay, I went 2 conventions ago. It was in Anaheim, the California convention. And there's a lady, I love her, Dran Reese. She has a couple of ministries she does in politics. Do you know her?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
good friend.
So she says, I'm going to do a speech. Come and critique my speech. So I said, okay. So I went. When she was done, she said, I want to introduce everyone in this room to the next chairman of the California Republican Party, Senator Mike Morrell. And I'm tongue-tied. I don't know what to say. And then, so I leave, and that sort of filtered in the convention. And then I started hitting people. Steve Franks, if you know him, he says, you got to run. And then Jack Herrera, who's just a good man, said, Senator, will you run? And then I went and spoke a few months later to the CRA, the California Republican Assembly, the more conservative wing of the party. There must have been 300 people there that day. And I gave a speech. And when I left about an hour later, I got a text that they had unanimously endorsed me to run for chair. And so I had not even committed to that, right? And so
that's called the grassroots anointing their candidate for chair.
Yeah, so Joni and I talked about it, and we said, we committed to God, country, and family years ago. Let's just see if doors continue to open, and we'll go through them. And so that's how I got involved. And then I think the thing is I think I have ability to retire right now, and I took about 2 weeks off, and I honestly got bored. Yeah, I really did. And so Joni recognizes that I need to be in the fight. I like it. I get energized. There'll be times that I'm tired, and it is interesting. I don't know what it is in my personality. And I'll go to give a speech, and I drive down there to Orange County. And so, you're a little bit like, man, this is a drag. And then I walk through that door, and I don't know what happens, but I'm energized, and I hit that ground running, and I'm enthusiastic about it, and I love it, and then Joni and I are the last people to leave because she's really personable and enjoys, one-on-one conversations. So it energizes. And, again, I think I'm being a good example to my kids.
I was saying that the wives are always the ones who, they love working the crowd.
And she works real good. She's honest. She's sincere. So she comes across that way. And people know she's genuine and authentic. So she's, good partner, I'll tell you. But the reason I want to run is I think there's some momentum. I think there's a grassroots thing going on that we don't want to miss, right? Washington said in his farewell speech, of all the habits that lead to political prosperity, morality and religion are indispensable supports. And so religion does play a big part in politics and how good a country's, how they're going to fare, how well they're going to fare. And so I don't know if you've been seeing what's happening in California, but the largest baptism ever in the history of the United States took place a few months ago in Huntington Beach. And then you've got Pirates Cove, where Chuck Smith from Calvary used to have baptism. They've had 3 or 4 there with young people, 4,000 or 5,000 people showing up. So there's a lot of things going there. That's number one. Number two, San Francisco got rid of they recalled 3 of their school board members. They're even trying to go less woke now, which is crazy. Yes. You've got parents returning by the thousands to school board meetings saying, no more, we don't want our kids indoctrinated with drag queen hour. We want them to simply learn so they can compete in a global economy. And that's not a Republican movement. That's not a faith movement. That's a we the people movement. That's a grassroots movement. And I think as Republicans, we need to help capture that and ride that wave, because it's coming down strong. Parents want good education for their kids. People in California are tired of Prop 47 that Governor Brown did, and they want safe neighborhoods. They want tough police on the streets. When they hear people mocking police, it's usually from that little minor segment of the population, but people want safe neighborhoods. Just like when you and I were growing up, we could play till dark and ride our bikes all over the city, right, without any kind of fear of being harmed. And so we need to get back to those days, and we can, when we punish the criminals severely, right, and we protect the good people and our citizens. And then the third thing, too, why we've got an advantage here is, as James Carville said, President Clinton's manager or campaign consultant said, it's the economy. And so right now, you've got our Governor Newsom says he wants to Trump-proof California. Here's I think we should seize this opportunity, because he hasn't had too many wins. I mean, he got a surplus when he inherited his seat. Now it's the largest deficit California's ever had. Our retirements are in danger for the government employees. He wants to make it a sanctuary state for not just what I talked about earlier, transgender surgeries, but also for illegal immigrants who are criminals to come to California. Crime is up in California. You can just go up. Food prices, gasoline prices, our taxes on gasoline and our state taxes are some of the highest in the United States of America. Everything this man has touched has not gone very well, and he wants to Trump-proof California. So I think there's another opportunity that we need to catch this wave, and we need to Gavin-proof California is really what we need to do.
So how do you think you would be able to catch this wave as chairman of the party? How does the party, I guess, fit into this?
Well, two things. Number one, it's got to be a we the people movement. So we want to involve the people as much as possible, not just the elected officials, but we have almost 300 Republican clubs in California. It's approaching that. We've got thousands, tens of thousands of possible volunteers. And I've asked a number of the party presidents of these different chapters, has our California Republican GOP come to you and asked for your help? And so far, I've had 100% no. They've never come. We've got thousands of volunteers, and so I think they can do things like adopt a candidate, where they build a bench in their own little communities, which are in conservative communities, liberal communities, in between. So I think there's an opportunity there that we can leverage, because I think these people want some guidance, And then the second thing is, when Joni and I first got married, we had to go for counseling, pre-marriage counseling. We were handed a book. And I remember the title was Communication, the Key to Your Marriage, right? Mm-hmm. And that, when I got into business, that's the key to your business. That's the key to your marriage. That's the key to politics. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And we have to communicate well. And remember who the great communicator was Ronald Reagan. He communicated things, and he won 49 out of 50 states. We can win here if we communicate. And so we want to leverage that. With almost 300 clubs, I would love to see every single club having a social media department, as well as having a couple of their people write op-eds to the local publications, so we can get those messages out. Because right now you only have basically 3 people in California that get that message out: the head of the Senate, head of the Assembly, and the head of the California Republican Party. So I want to leverage those people. They want purpose. They want to take our state back. And with Trump winning, and he did better in California, and we won a lot of nonpartisan seats in California, school boards and city council. We need to seize this moment in time, because the winds are at our back, and I think there's just a lot of opportunity to restore California. The road to restoring California, we want to seize the moment, and as California goes, so goes the nation. This is the greatest state. It's just the politics are really bad. So we only have to change one thing, the direction of politics, and we do that by clear communication. And so those are not hurdles we can overcome any of those hurdles. They're just moving the ball down the field 5 yards at a time.
So you mentioned that we took a lot of nonpartisan seats, city councils, school boards in this last election. How do you propose pulling those people in to assist the party?
Well, I think in some ways we are. I went to speak at the Silicon Valley Republican Women's Club the first time probably about 7 years ago. My fellow senators said, what do they have? Well, a couple of them said, what do they have? 5 people there. A couple others said, what do they have? 3 members there. Because it's Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
And so they have over 300 members. And so it's a big club. And so the president is Jan Soleil. Love her. She's a tiger, man, I'll tell you. Her and Wendy, the VP of that club. And so I think they've recruited about 7 of their friends they recruited 10, and I think they've won 7 elections in school boards and city council races, and that's in the Silicon Valley. And so those people are already attached to that club, and they'll stay attached because that club helped them get elected. I mean, you've got people that are out knocking doors. We know a couple, Franklin and Mingy. They're awesome, and they go to 3 different school board meetings. Their kids are growing, but they attend these meetings. They pass out stuff to parents, and there's a movement coming, and they're stirring a lot of positive things up. And parents are starting to side with them and say, we want more out of our school districts. And so, I mean, you have some, I mean, when you see Silicon Valley producing results, that gives me hope for where I live in San Bernardino, Riverside County, because it's more conservative down here in Southern California. So there's a lot more we can grow. And again, where we've neglected is not clearly communicating what we believe. And we can't be timid to do that because we can't move to the center and be all things to all people, which the Republican Club, that's one of their faults they want to do. They think we have to look more like Democrats to win. That has always been a losing strategy throughout history. You cannot be all things to all people. Right. People don't respect that. Look at Abraham Lincoln didn't compromise with the slaveholders. Winston Churchill didn't compromise with the Nazis, and Ronald Reagan didn't compromise with the Soviets. They stuck to the hard issues. They clearly communicated those things, and they won. And remember, going back to Lincoln in his debates, at the famous Lincoln and Douglas debates, he lost that race, right? Mm-hmm. Douglas went, let's do the 10th Amendment, states' rights on slavery. And Lincoln said, no, we know if it's immoral in one state, it's immoral in all the states. He lost that race. He didn't win it, but he hung in there, and then he became president, not on the first round of vote at the convention, but it took 3 rounds for Lincoln to secure the nomination. Yeah. And he goes on to be one of the greatest, because your greats always take on the most difficult issues. They're not afraid, but you have to think about how you're going to clearly communicate those things. And the thing I love about Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, is he talked tough, but you didn't notice it because he always did it with a wink, a smile, a nod of the head, and his voice was always calm. And so I think we can take a page from his playbook, and we can learn and just copy what the greats have done, and we can have victory.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You go back and look at this last election. It was a firm policy stance, a set of firm beliefs that drew people to the Republican Party and Republican candidates this time. You know, what I found really interesting in your comments about taking over school board races or school boards around the state. In our little community of South Lake Tahoe, which is the most Democrat part of El Dorado County, we elected, swept the council. We now control the council for the first time in about 15 years. And so I agree. I think the Republican Party was on the march in 2024. The question's going to be, how do we stay on the march in 2026 and 2028? And what problems do you see in front of the Republican Party to be able to, become relevant again? For 25 years, we've been essentially irrelevant in the state of California. Tell me what some of your visions are in the Republican Party relevant again.
Well, I think one of the things that I've been speaking on is we're happy Trump got elected, but this government is just not going to succeed just with him. If you remember when Benjamin Franklin came out of Independence Hall, he was asked by a lady, what happened in there? He says, ma'am, you've been given a republic, providing you can keep it. Yeah. And remember, we're a government of, by, and for the people. The Constitution starts off, we the people, not they the government, not they the politicians. And so the thing that I'm sort of preaching is we need to help President Trump, right? He can't do this on his own. We have to get involved. We got a great opportunity. I mean, if we can turn California around, which I am convinced we can take the rest of the country by storm, because this is a great place to live. It's just the politics, and there's opportunity. Let me share a couple of things, some other key leading indicators that I see happening. Rush Limbaugh, I loved. He was great. When he passed away, I felt there was a big hole in my heart, and I thought, what a gap he's leaving. And so I thought, how's that going to be filled? It's being filled by a thing called podcasts, like what you have. You've got people with, podcasts, 1,000 people listening to them, to as many as 100 million people listen to some of the podcasts during the week.
That's right.
And so many of them I've checked out because I've been on maybe 50 podcasts. Most of them are conservative, and they're talking about family issues, issues on morality. They're talking about faith. They're talking about economic issues, and they're talking about political issues, all the issues that I care about and that most people care about. And so that gap has been filled. This is just unbelievable podcast. And so I think the thing is, that's another way that we need to realize is happening. And again, the ones that are succeeding are not the liberals, not the Marxist rhetoric ones. It's the ones who are conservative, Constitution, and they have a foundation of morality in there. So there's a lot of the key leading indicators, a lot of signs that I think there's opportunities coming our way. And that's why I'm not filled with false hope. I'm just reading the tea leaves and looking at, what's happening on these podcasts and what's happening. Joni and I are going to go to AmFest today, later on, Charlie Kirk's thing. And I was looking at something on social media last night, and there's thousands of kids there. And this guy, we were over there with met his assistant, and she gave us a tour the other day. And he's got all these flags of different colleges that he's spoken at. He's really having an impact. And so He's reaching our youth. There's so many things going on right now that I think are positive. At one time, California is the only state blessed with 21 missions, World Vision, Focus on the Family, Azusa Street Revivals, all founded here. Your cities that start with the word San or Santa means saint, right? So at one time, this state, for sure, in America, was God's state, right? And I'm convinced he wants it back. And so I think there's opportunity when his people stand up. So we just got to keep reminding people of those things. But I think there's momentum right now. I think I've had a number of people tell me in 2016 they were glad Trump got elected, but they didn't really engage in politics. And they realize now they can't drop the ball. So I think the momentum is on our side. We just got to keep it going. And again, I think if I'm ahead of the party, I'm going to go back to the grassroots and do everything I can to promote them and encourage them and give them hopefully vision to why we keep the path this way.
Thank you for watching the In Defense of Freedom podcast. If you believe in the mission of defending constitutional rights and protecting individual freedoms here in California and across the country, we ask for your support. The California Constitutional Rights Foundation is doing vital work, but they can't do it alone. Your donation helps fund critical legal battles, educational programs, and advocacy efforts to preserve the liberties that matter to us all. Please consider making a contribution today by visiting cacrf.org. Every dollar makes a difference, and together we can stand strong in defense of freedom.
And so that's the biggest thing I hope I can accomplish is how to motivate and direct our people in our party, the grassroots.
Super. Hey, as I mentioned, for about the last 25 years, the Republican Party's been pretty irrelevant in California. Having run statewide in 2018, the party did what the party typically does, and that was not much of anything when it came to the down ticket races. Major donors didn't seem to have any confidence in the party in 2018 and 2024. I don't know what their attitude was then, but it just seems like money being the mother's milk of politics. How do you change the image that the Republican Party has as being pretty much irrelevant in California?
Well, that's going to be a challenge. But I think the first thing is you have to have a clear and concise plan. Again, getting back to Benjamin Franklin said, and I think this is well said, he said, most people never plan to fail, but fail to plan. And so you have to have a well thought out plan with measurements. You have to be measuring it, your success. You have to have timelines to guide you, and then you have to produce results. And so, number one, we're going to have to convince the donors of that we have a plan, a winning plan. And I think we also need to share some of the things I just shared, that it's a time to capitalize on some of the wins, that this movement that's happened, the country is moving to the right. I talk about the podcast. Trump did better here in 24 than he did in 2000, in 20, I
Right.
mean. And so I think we got to arm him with those facts. And I think there's momentum. President Trump came here 3 times to raise money, but he came here a 4th time to Coachella Valley and gave a big rally when he knew he was probably going to lose in this state, and 40,000 people showed up, and it was not a fundraiser. So I'm trying to read the tea leaves and the sign. So I think he's a driven man. I think he wants to capture the toughest state, and the 2 toughest states, and I think that's New York. Because remember how he knew he was going to lose New York, but he reached out to the firemen, he reached out to the construction guys. I think this guy is so motivated to win that he's going to want to put his time and effort in California as well as New York. And so, and if he doesn't, it's going to be my job to try to convince the administration of that, right? And so I think we can be relevant with a plan, and in implementing that plan, and in getting back to the 280 to 300 clubs we have. I mean, we've got a volunteer base of tens of thousands of people that we need to access. And I think that's a huge thing in winning elections. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, which isn't going to be, it doesn't take a scientist to figure out what we need to do, move the ball forward. And I'm not about hitting home runs. I'm more concerned about hitting singles and getting on the base and just moving that ball down the field 5 yards at a time. And eventually you start scoring. And so practical things, we have to have goals that are not just measurable, but things we can achieve. We can't say, we're going to take the state back in 2 years and, we're going to win the entire Senate. We have to build a bench. We have to think, the future. And that's one of the things that bill on a bench is the foundation for the future. And so there's just a lot of things we can implement to give people hope and some clear direction that we can win in California.
Mike, I think you're hitting it right on the head, because I was on Nicole Shanahan's podcast about a month ago. Of course, she was JFK's VP candidate. She's pretty much of a libertarian at heart, but has supported all of the radical left-wing ideologues that have gotten elected, everything from the DA in Los Angeles, Gascon, and she was saying she regrets that. She cannot believe what they've done and how they've simply ignored the will of the people of California and the will of the people of the nation as a whole. So I think with a well-defined plan, there are people out there that are looking for leadership. And what you're describing right now is leadership. And that's what's going to turn the Republican Party around. Instead of, leading from behind, you're the type of individual that'll lead from the front, just like Donald Trump does. And I'm so excited about you running for state chair. If I'd been there at that CRA convention, I would have been, standing up and asking you to run right then, because I'll tell you, anyone that's run statewide, anyone that's run for the state legislature knows that the party itself is so critical to providing that floor that we need to be able to stand on. And for so often, a candidate's out there, there's no floor, we're standing in sand, and we can't get any momentum going. So to have you running for state chair is just outstanding. But I do have a couple of other questions, because I think you're unique here as a candidate for state chair. I've heard, and in some cases heard from legislators and former legislators, that really what the legislative caucuses in Sacramento want is the party to just get out of the way. How do you reconcile that, providing leadership in California and having competing leadership in the legislature? How will you deal with those kinds of dilemmas?
Well, one thing is we got to produce results to show them that we are relevant. And so I've already started doing some things. I made a proposal, I should say, to the bishop of a large denomination in California to provide interns to the Senate office and the Assembly offices. Most senators maybe only have 2 interns per year. I used to get about 20 per year, because it helps you build a base. People like to see those young college interns out there. And then also we provided and trained them in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and some selective writings of the Federalist Papers. And the reason why is we just didn't want to work them. I felt like we owed them something to train them about these self-evident truth. And the reason I mentioned that second paragraph of the Declaration is we would have these meetings that would start at 6:30. I bring in pizza, and I didn't mean them to go this long, but those young people, the last two that we did, they stayed past midnight asking questions because remember they've grown up in moral relativism, and so it used to perplex them that really is there self-evident truth. And then you refer them back to the first paragraph, which says there is, according to the laws of nature, John Locke's natural law, right? And so you work through some examples of that, and I got to tell you, they were excited. A lot of them came back when I was running for office and would knock doors for me on weekends. And so I gave them, a lot, and they gave back to me. And it was exciting because I realized that a lot of these young people, it gives me hope for our country, even though I think a lot of them been misled, perhaps because of our educational system. But they really bought in that there is self-evident truth. These people are looking for hope, and they're looking for honesty and answers. And so it was an exciting thing to do. So I think by producing results, and like I say, we claim we want to get young people in the party. And I've worked with this denomination, went over a syllabus with the bishop, and a lot of his churches, there's about 300 in California, are in democratic areas, and he's willing to get some of these college students and put them as interns in Senate offices, Assembly offices, and congressional offices, providing the Assembly and the Senate sees the value in that, which there's a whole lot of value in getting those young people to work for you. I mean, it's free labor, but they get a nice resume builder that they, intern for a senator or an assembly person or a Congress member. And so it's a fit. So I think the thing is that I've already started working on those things. And even if I don't get elected, I'm going to continue to try to get that and feed the Republican Party with these younger interns. So I think the thing is if I can show that we can provide value, they're going to come our way and they're going to want us. Second thing too, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, we have almost 300 clubs, and we're not accessing and asking for their help. And I think they're willing to help. They're here to help our country. And I think we have to align and ask some of our senators and our assembly members, how can you provide an opportunity for them to get involved in your district and help you? I think what I know about these Republicans, they're all for that. They're looking to engage with the Senate and the Assembly. And so we got access to, like I say, 10,000 plus possible volunteers. And so again, that's going to move the ball down the court. And so again, if we can show that we can create value, we're going to be wanted and we're going to be accepted. And I think we can accomplish that. I'm confident we can accomplish that.
Okay. So often the legislative leadership looks around California and seems like it designates candidates. How do you think the Republican Party, the formal party, interfaces in selecting or recruiting candidates?
Well, yeah, I actually was asked to do that when I was in the Senate, to find somebody to run in districts on both sides of me. And it was like 9 months out. I think this is something we should be fishing around the clock. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not going to win an election if you start 9 months out, right? And so I mentioned earlier, we have to build a base, we have to build a bench. And that's why I like bringing these people up through city council and nonpartisan races like school boards, because if you do that, number one, they've already proven they can win an election. They've raised some money, they've got some experience, and they've got name ID now. And so the thing is, we got to be growing those things and then promoting them up to the Assembly and the state Senate issue. And I think we can do that, but we've got to constantly be on the look to recruit people. And that means the Senate does, the Assembly, as well as the Cal GOP. But also, I just think there's a lot of resources. Who knows better? I gave you an example about the Silicon Valley Republican Club. Who knows better to engage possible candidates in the Silicon Valley, their club or Mike Morrell, who lives 400 miles away? And so I think the thing is, these clubs can be a real benefit to us if we engage them and ask them. What I've thought about doing is writing a criteria and passing it out to each club. Here's what the qualifications are that we need somebody to run. They've got to be able to speak well. They've got to be able to really understand the issues. They've got to be willing to dial for dollars and ask for money too. And so here's sort of the criteria, what we're looking for. If you have somebody on your radar, please have them call me or I'll call them and let's talk them through these things. But we start on day one, right after the election. General Norman Schwarzkopf, I love what he said. Remember the Gulf War hero? He said, it's better to sweat during peacetime than have to bleed during war. I love that. And so what we do as Republicans, we bleed during war because we wait till the last minute and, we don't win. And so it's better to sweat during peacetime. And how you do that is right after the election, within a week, you start recruiting right then. You start campaigning right then. You don't spend all your time in Sacramento. This captures a lot of assembly people and Senate people. They see the shiny floors and that older building's beautiful, right? And so you're easily enamored with it, and people call you senators. It's easy to have your pride sort of, go off the rails a little bit. And so people like that. I liked it. I got to be honest with you like that. But the thing is I didn't want to bleed during war. So I always made sure that my district was covered and we worked it hard and we recruited interns and we worked them hard and we trained them well. And so the same thing is, we want to do that with all those possible volunteers, the thousands of them that we have. We want to work with them because they know their cities better than we do for the most part. And so not only do the electeds have to start recruiting and looking for talent, but I think these clubs can help us too, especially if we kind of give them some criteria what to look for. So there's just a lot of things we can do which are not that tough that will produce results.
Okay. So when I ran statewide, I thought I knew everything till I didn't. And so how do you envision the party helping candidates that are relatively new, that are running for state office? How do you envision training those types of candidates so that they're better able to do the dialing for dollars, the grassroots organization, and that sort of thing, things that are so critical for a candidate in a district race?
Well, when I owned my mortgage company, my lending company, my real estate company, before somebody walks into your office, you just don't start selling them homes. You pre-qualify them, right? You find out how much they make, how much they can qualify for, if they've got the good credit to be able to purchase that home. So we want to pre-qualify people. We just don't want to ask people to run in and have them run. I think the thing is, and this is like a little bit of throwing cold water in their face. You got to really, share with people, these are the pitfalls, but this is how you get around it. And here's the things you need to do to be a successful candidate. So let me give you a couple examples, because I had people call me. I had one guy call me. He was running for Congress. And I said, how many people are in your congressional district? And so he says, I don't know. Well, that's a question you should know, right? I think it's 750,000 people. And I said, on an off year, because this was in 22, how many people typically vote in your district? And he says, I don't know that. Well, it was 250,000, I think, right? And I said, so you need to get 125,000 plus one vote to win that. And so I said, walk me through how you're going to, it's all a numbers game. How are you going to get that? He had no idea. So people have to count the costs and the pitfalls, but also the opportunities available. And then I had another guy call me who wanted me to help him. And this was the primary was coming up. And I said, well, are you knocking doors? And he goes, we're starting this weekend. And it was 3 weeks before the election, the primary. And I thought, you know what? This guy's not going to win, right? And so I think the thing is, I don't want to throw cold water on a person's face, but we've got to train them well and let them know, again, here's the challenges you're going to face, but here's the things that you can do to optimize your probabilities. It's all about a numbers game. So let's figure out how we're going to get those numbers. If you can get a sign in a person's yard, you've got those 2 people in that home there and maybe a couple of neighbors. So if you need 1,000 signs, maybe that can end up with, 10,000 votes. And then how many doors are you going to knock? You're going to get a certain percentage of those. And so, I mean, when you throw those numbers at people, they're going to have to ante up and really realize if they want to commit or not. Because you do have some people, they go out there like, I talked to one lady the other day and she goes, I hit every fair and festival and county fair that I could, which I think that's a good thing. But the thing is, you don't know how many of those people vote, how many don't vote, how many are Democrats. You got to knock those doors. Let me just tell you one thing. the most important, there was a lot of things. It's like, you need to do 100 things well to get in an election. And when I first ran, I was in a slightly Democratic district and I won pretty big. Knocking doors was the most important thing, and I mean, I knocked literally thousands of doors because I targeted those people. I didn't want to, just talk to people who weren't high propensity voters. So I knocked thousands of doors. I kept track of that. I measured it and kept track of how many people I thought were going to vote for me on that. And so we put all these figures into the hat, and my campaign manager, we had 7 people in the race this was for the primary. And I remember he and I figured we would probably end up out of the 7 or 8 people running with 31.5% of the vote. And we ended up having 31.6% of the vote. And so when I talk about measuring things, let me tell you one thing, and I'm sorry here to ramble on, but when we first got married, Joni was sick. So I wanted to make a lemon meringue pie because that was my favorite. So anyway, I made it and it was runny and too sweet. And she said, "What the heck did you do?" She says, so anyway, it called for, I forgot, this is 40 plus years ago, like 1 cup of sugar. And I put 1.5 in there. And she goes, "Why'd you do that?" The recipe says 1 cup. And then another thing is you needed cornstarch. And I couldn't find cornstarch and I didn't know the difference. So I found corn syrup is what made it runny. And I put that in there, right? So it was a complete disaster. And she says, this is great advice. She says, "Mike, this recipe from Betty Crocker, it's been tested over and over and over again, and it's been proven to be successful. You don't put any less or any more sugar in there. You use the exact amount as the recipe calls for it, and you'll have a successful pie." And ever since that, I looked at that, even with the race. You don't want to add too much sugar. You have to have, more than you. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble like Biden. Sorry. Anyway, she was right on that, and that's what a campaign's all about. You have to have a recipe for success. It's got to be written out, and those candidates have to follow those step by step and check off as they go, and we can increase our odds of winning.
Okay. How do you see the party then interfacing, with everybody? You've got the legislators out looking for candidates. And they don't provide any particular training for the candidates. They just kind of go out and find the guy who seems to have the most money, and then all of a sudden you've got him running or her running, and they may or may not go out and implement a plan because they may or may not know what the plan should be. So how do you see the party interfacing there?
Well, I think, we ask them, we volunteer to help. I think it's going to be incumbent upon me to lay out a well thought out plan and maybe even a training manual for the head of the Senate and the Assembly. And then, hopefully they'll recognize the value in that, and then they'll ask us to be involved. But if they don't ask us to be involved, then, we'll just recruit candidates in some of those areas they don't go after. And we'll try to pick up a couple wins there. But I think the thing is if we have a well thought out plan and provide a syllabus on how we would train people to run, and again, if we create value, I think the leadership of the Assembly and the Senate is going to buy into it. I actually have a lot of confidence in that because I've been fortunate to be good at winning elections. And the Democrats, what they do is they are constantly polling, looking for weakness in candidates and in districts. And so whenever you see Democrats pouring a lot of money into a congressional run or a Senate run, that's because they smell blood in the water and they take advantage of that. And so one of the things why I mentioned early on, I wanted to be strong, and I started campaigning literally like a couple of weeks after I had, won my first election, and I kept doing that all the way through. They never put up a candidate against me. And again, for 2 elections, I was in a Democratic district, and I don't think they ever put up any money against me, And again, because you got to project strength and you got to work your district, and you have to work. Here's the thing: sometimes people get elected, and I've seen this where they neglect to work their district like they should. If we truly want to be public servants, we've got to put a lot of time into our district. We have to show up at events, and we want to show that we're a public servant, not a master, and we're not above the people. And I remember another little thing that I would do is people would write in to the Senate and either say, hey, you suck, and I disagree with you on this bill, or I really like this. And so I would purposely, I couldn't respond. I had our people respond, but I would write purposely 30 cards, handwritten cards per week, half of them to the people that said, you're a terrible person, Morrell, and the other half thanking people for supporting me, And people appreciated that. There was an op-ed, or not an op-ed, but an opinion piece just saying, I'm a Democrat and I'm not for Morrell, but I would vote for him just because he took the time to do this and that. And so I was really mindful to be able to try to be a public servant and serve our people. And then again, you increase your odds of winning that election next time around. And like I said, the Democrats didn't spend any money against me. At least I don't think they did. And if they did, they didn't do it in a big way that I noticed. So you got to stay strong is what you have to do to win those races.
Well, it seems like, I hate to belabor this point, but it seems like the legislative caucuses, the leadership focus primarily on, the more winnable districts. And obviously in California, we've got a lot of seats that are just, if they're not marginal, they're impossible. What do you say to candidates that want to run in these kinds of seats? They live on the outskirts of Los Angeles that have, turned awfully blue, or in the Bay Area where you only have 20% or less Republican registration. How would the party work with those types of candidates?
Well, a couple of things. I think we can win districts that are 15 points or less advantage to the Democrats. I think those are doable. And so there's a lot of those that we can do. But again, you got to build a bench and you got to think a couple of years out. You can't recruit them, a day before the election. And so far as those districts where this was a surprise to me, that there are 20 points registration, 25 points in the deficit behind the Democrats. A lot of the people, I actually went out and spoke at some of their fundraisers, which they appreciated because I wanted to encourage them, because I knew they were in difficult districts. And a lot of them knew they were sacrificing because when they ran, their opponent had to spend money to stop them. Therefore, their opponent could not give money to other candidates to win races. So we had a lot of people. I was kind of surprised. They knew they probably wouldn't win, but they were in there to help the party, to help California, to take money away from the Democrats having to spend it. But also, a lot of them were thinking, I'm going to run the second time around because I'm building, some value, some name ID, and perhaps next time I can win. And so I think the thing is, my admiration for those people, was sky high. But there's another thing. We have to redraw districts. I don't know where we start, but we have to sue because these districts, when you go back and you read, the spirit of it is you're not supposed to split up cities. You're supposed to keep communities of interest. And the districts, the cities have to be contiguous. And if you look at the signs, in my district, they just put my little neighborhood that I live, instead of going east where my district was, they went west and they went up through the national forest and missed the Republican cities of Glendora, Laverne, San Dimas, and Upland. And then they came back down in more liberal districts. And so this is wrong. Communities of interest, like we live in Rancho Cucamonga, we shop in Upland. And Upland wasn't even in it was in my district, but then they drew it out of my district. And so I think the thing is that it's totally wrong. It's not the spirit of fairness. And so we've got to hit these guys with a hammer because if we're going to win California, we got to draw those lines so they're honest, ethical, and moral. And the reason we got that commission before is because people were critical of the way districts were drawn. You've seen them. They look like a giraffe, right? They're worse now, And let me say another thing, why this is a corrupt system, in my personal opinion, is the day that they said, this commission, that I could have my supporters come in and advocate for drawing the districts the way we think they should be drawn, was on a Sunday afternoon at 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon on Father's Day. Do you know how hard it was to get people to come out on a Sunday afternoon at 3 in the afternoon on Father's Day. It was tough because, people have family duties. And I thought that was wrong that they did that. They should have had it a weekday, or they should have had it a day that's not, Father's Day. And so the whole thing, it seems misguided. A friend of mine tried to get on that commission, and he said they rejected him. I don't know if he was accurate on this, but this is what he told me, because he had never had any kind of sensitivity training, And so we have to redraw those districts, or we're going to be stuck in this hole for the rest of our lives. So we got to create a wave. I think we need to do some kind of a lawsuit if that's feasible or not. But the way the districts are drawn, I think anybody with common sense, if you looked at those pictures, you would say there's something wrong here, because they weave in and out. And it looks like somebody who took a psychedelic drug trip, the way they're drawn. So
you get elected in March. Where do you see the party in 2 years after you've been leader?
Yeah, what I think we can accomplish is more cohesiveness. I think I can help bring the party together. I'm conservative, but there are people that aren't as conservative as me. But I can make the case that we all have opinions. We should talk things out. We can argue, we can discuss, but nothing, mean-spirited. But the thing is when I make the case, I'm going to do it by standing on the shoulders of those people who possess a superior wisdom than Mike Morrell, which is easy to find. But what I mean by that, it's going to be the founders, right? We're going to stick to those constitutional principles, and I do not plan on violating any of those things. So to make the case, I'm going to stick to that and always refer back. The reason I made this decision was because it's a principle in Constitution we should follow. And so I think that's going to eliminate, if they can make a better argument than Madison, Adams, or Jefferson, then so be it. So I think there's an advantage there. The other advantage too, bringing people back to that, is restoring those principles of limited government that I think we can do. And then I've got to pick up a few wins the next time around, which again, I think good planning, we can do that, but we got to hit the road in the ground running, get this intern program going. If we get that off the ground and get that smoothed out, that could be a huge win for the future and a huge win in the near future. And then I think another thing too, just clear communication. The biggest asset that I think we can do is trying to get more of these Republican clubs involved and bring some cohesiveness together with them in the Assembly, the Senate, as well as the California GOP. And so again, we've got thousands of volunteers there. Hope to incorporate them in there, as well as if most of those can have a media department and a op-ed department to be able to write editorials for these local publications. I just think we'll move the party forward, and we're going to be building a team. That's my goal, is to build a team that is positioned to win races.
How do you see, Steve Frank, when he ran for party chairman, one of his major issues was voter registration. Where do you see voter registration fitting in with the party's direction under your leadership?
Yeah, voter registration is a must, as well as election integrity. Again, voter registration, election integrity, those are things we have to do, we must do, and everybody needs to cooperate that. And the Senate does, the Assembly does, and the Cal GOP needs to lead that effort. We have to get out the vote. And again, I think it's an opportune time. A lot of people voted for Trump in California. A lot of people are dissatisfied with the way school districts are going, the cost of living. And so if we make the case, I think we can register voters. It's a good time to take advantage of these opportunities. Again, I like using that term, seize in the moment. We're on a roll. A lot of good things are happening. I think Donald Trump's performing better now than when he was campaigning, because he's actually doing things and that people like. And so I think the thing is he's doing some things, producing some measurable results. And I think that's going to give us an opportunity to make the case to come to the Republican Party. Plus, remember, younger people liked him. When he got shot that day and then he came up there with his fist up and said, "Fight, fight, fight," that showed who he really was, because that's not pre-planned to do that. If I got shot, I'd be, is my ear still, you'd be whatever. He comes up, he's fighting. And I think that was very attractive to people, both men and women. And so I think there's a lot of young people we can get on our side. And so I'm encouraged, and So those are some of the things that I would like to implement. And then again, we'll have some success in 2 years and more success in 4.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for being here today on Defending Freedom. It's great to have you. It's wonderful to have you running as a candidate for state party chairman. I think the Republican Party needs your leadership. Before we conclude, though, let me give you an opportunity to make your final argument, and then we'll conclude, say thank you, and look forward to seeing you successful in your race for chair.
Thank you. So the case is, I've got a winning track record. I've got a lot of experience in putting together businesses, organizations, nonprofits, and they've all have succeeded, which I'm fortunate. Mm-hmm. And then I've spent time, as I mentioned, in the Senate and the Assembly, 10 years at the state capitol. So I have experience there, I have experience in fundraising. So I think the thing is I've got some substantial results that I produce, winning results, not just in business, but fortunately, some things have gone my way with my kids that have been well, and my marriage, and I'm grateful for that. And then also being in the Senate and the Assembly has given me a lot of experience for a lot of things, not just fundraising, but how you work through the system. So I think I'm well qualified. And then also my goal is to defend freedom, and I love my country. And as Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon says, the duty of a father is to leave an inheritance to his children's children. And that's one reason I'm here, to fight for the future generation. Joni and I now have 9 grandkids, so we have a vested interest in the future, and we love those kids. We want safe neighborhoods for those kids, a thriving economy and opportunity. And we want them to be educated well, not indoctrinated. Much of modern education today, as my daughter reminds me, is laced with a Marxist rhetoric designed to separate that child from the parent and make the child a ward of the state, as they've done in the Soviet Union and China. So we want to knock that off. And again, I want to leave a bright future for my children's children, as well as I just love America, and I was born and raised in California, and I love my state. And so I would be grateful for anybody who wants to contribute to the campaign. Go to my website and vote for me if you're a delegate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We sure appreciate your appearing on our podcast today. Good luck in your race for state party chairman.
Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on your program, Stephen. Thank you.
You're welcome.